Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Making the Turn podcast featuring Double D and the Dooch. And we are really excited because we are still coming off an incredible Ryder Cup to where we saw an amazing performance by the European team taking down the American team. But I think one of the stars that has really emerged post Ryder Cup has been Marco Simone and the amazing venue that it was for this incredible venue. So, I know, unfortunately, there's been a little bit of extra press for the golf club in the recent weeks with it looked like one of maybe the big hospitality tents catching ablaze. And that certainly is one way to take them down if you don't want to use them again. So I'm not sure if they were trying to save a little time or if it was an actual accident. But long story short, we're very fortunate because one of the leading designers for Marco Simone, Mr. Dave Sampson from the European Golf Design Company, is with us, and he is going to join us and explain to us the fine art that is golf course architecture so that guys like myself can understand, because this is definitely where Double D has the upper hand on the Duke. So I'm going to let Dan probably give him a little proper read in real quick, and then I'm going to let them kind of take it away, and I'll jump in when I can.
Well, thanks, Dooch. I mean, Dave, we spoke before the Ryder Cup. There's been incredible accolades for Marco Simone. He's been described as the best Ryder Cup venue of the century. People have said, can we have the Ryder Cup there every year that it comes to Europe? I mean, I just wanted to find out how you were feeling in the build-up to the event, because there is so much scrutiny now of golf course architecture. It's become a very hot button topic within the golf community over the last 5 or 10 years, and it's only getting sort of hotter. For an event the size and magnitude of the Ryder Cup, how did it feel as being in your shoes as the man who designed the course that was going to stage the Ryder Cup in the lead up to the event itself?
Well, firstly, thanks a lot for having me on. To be honest, I was nervous. On top everything was calm, but the legs beneath the water were like a duck. But I think that was probably 2 or 3 weeks before the event. But from the moment I got to Marco Simone and actually saw the course, I was a lot calmer. The course was in great shape. I don't know. Yeah, I suppose just because of the condition that the course was in, things felt, calm. And fortunately the week was great. So yeah, I mean, it was the weather was amazing. The staging that Ryder Cup Europe had built, that was incredible. And the golf course played as well as we had hoped.
I got to imagine, you're in a unique position, right? So you're designing a golf course for a Ryder Cup. Essentially, you're designing a golf course for the top percent of the top professional players in the world. And these guys kind of have a knack for making even the best architects look maybe like they're not up to snuff. And they go out there and shoot ridiculously low scores and do some things that you wouldn't necessarily think is possible. So my hat's off to you, because I think that the golf course really has become a star in the aftermath. And I think one of the things that was really cool about the golf course is it really wasn't part of the story, but was the whole story. And it's a cool trick that Augusta National kind of pulls every year, and they make reference to the golf course all the time, but nobody actually directly references the golf course. And it's an amazing a trick, I want to call it, because I don't have a better vocabulary like my partner. But it's an amazing trick that you seem to have pulled off, making it the star that kind of stays hidden until the aftermath, and the people have the ability to kind of dive into the details and the analytics of it all.
Yeah, well, thank you for those comments. Yeah, really nice to hear. Yeah, I mean, I think, Marco Simone, I think what people, you are, for a Ryder Cup course, you're trying to create a lot more than just the golf course. You're actually trying to create, the atmosphere. You're trying to, build in all these, and I mentioned it to Dan on the other podcast. You're trying to build in a lot of, hospitality units. There's so much more, factoring in just, I mean, obviously it was a blank site, but you're trying to, you know, as I said to Dan, you're trying to find the best golf holes, but you're also trying to factor in, you know, what are those best holes going to be for the spectator. And you know, if we look back on, you know, some of the comments from, you know, Italian Opens and some of the players who probably played in the, you know, pre-round when there's, you know, there was in effect no crowd similar to what you had of the Ryder Cup, but you know, an example, you know, there are numerous uphill approach shots, but you know, we position those greens with big embankments behind. So, for instance, 15 is a good example. But you know, we were trying to look at the site and trying to use these features to create that atmosphere and that experience, you know, for both the spectators and the players. You know, and coming back to the routing, you know, I always felt one of the strengths of the golf course was the central area that we had, where we managed to position 4 golf holes, being the first, where obviously you've got all the atmosphere that provides and the pressure, and then you had the 7th and the 16th and the 17th, and you know, it enabled the spectators to actually stay very close. So you didn't have to go too far away, and a match would always be coming through it within half an hour or an hour if you decided to stay, you know, in that particular area. And I you know, we always felt that central valley area was, which we pitched as the Coliseum to the Federation back in 2016. You know, would be the real heart and the real hub of the golf course. And you know, thankfully it proved to be. And going, you know, also, you know, people have also, you know, there were a few comments about, you know, 18 playing into the setting sun, and you know, look, the clubhouse position, you know, that was fixed, but you know, the drama and the, you know, the amazing light that actually got cast on 18 on Friday and Saturday was really good. But you know, having the back 9 over the more undulating, interesting, dramatic land with the views over Rome, we just felt, you know, that was so much more important than, okay, you know, we wouldn't normally have 18 playing west towards the setting sun, but you know, we were willing to sacrifice that small little bit to get, you know, those back 9 drivable par 4s, short 12, 13, those really key, interesting, you know, match play holes, I guess, on the back 9.
It was an incredible course for match play. I think that's what it turned out to be. There were so many swings. When you look at, you know, Europe, whenever US seemed to win a hole, Europe would hit back straight away. I mean, I think it worked beautifully. It worked beautifully as a match play golf course. And you know, the 16, you mentioned the 16th. It must have been really exciting for you to see that ringed by spectators, you know, thousands upon thousands of people, almost creating a complete encirclement of that hole, because you can't have a dress rehearsal for the Ryder Cup. You can have Italian Opens, but it is on a completely different scale. So I wanted to ask you, when you were on the grounds at Marco Simone for the week, you must have been looking at so many different things that you'd factored into your design and your routing. What were the little details, if you like, that you that made you feel really good and satisfied beyond the golf? You know, because there's so much that went into this, because it's unlike any other event. And as you said, the infrastructure is so huge around it, and that has to bleed into how you design the holes and how you route the golf course. So I just wondered what little details really succeeded for you.
Well, definitely from a spectator point of view, you know, like I remember standing behind 7 green, and you see, you know, all the fans coming down the left-hand side of 7, you know, and they were like 15, 20 deep. You know, you got the raised hospitality unit, and it was a similar feeling, you know, stood behind the green on or sat behind the green on 16, and you know, I was very thankful for some of these hospitality units, because it actually provided a little bit of shade because it was so hot. But you know, you just, I mean, I did sit there watching 17, well, most days from behind the green, and seeing all the fans come down. I mean, and you're right. There's no dress rehearsal, but you know, we have pictured it in our minds from the moment it's been on the drawing board. And I suppose there was, I was, you know, after on Sunday, once the matches had been won, Jeremy Slesser, our managing director, and I were just we were stood on the top floor of the hospitality unit on 16, just watching all the people coming back, towards the first for the trophy celebration. So, it was quite a nice, like it was a lovely moment. Just the two of us have poured our hearts and soul in. Jeremy from 2014, me from 2017. Just yeah, it was a lovely moment watching all the people and just standing back and taking it all in and thinking, oh yeah, it, it's gone really well, and we couldn't have been obviously happier. But yeah, I mean seeing all the spectators, ringing the fairways, all the way around, and you know knowing that we had factored it in. Um, and that's what we had the opportunity. This was probably the first purpose-built Ryder Cup course, um, and knowing that we had the opportunity, and grateful for the fact that we didn't mess it up, I suppose. Yeah.
No, I thought it was awesome. I mean, even being an American, and obviously, it was a little rough start, and then it didn't get much better from there. But I just thought that the golf course demanded such quality golf that, and it really raised the. I felt like it really raised the level of play. And it really demanded that out of the players. So I was telling Dan before we came on, I actually operate a indoor golf facility, and we use TrackMan, and we're fortunate enough to have Marco Simone on our TrackMan. So I actually played the golf course before coming on this morning, just to kind of get a little more of a feel for the golf
Mm,
course
mm.
prior to talking to you. And the first thing that kind of stuck out to me was, it's like, man, it's definitely the feeling of a big park, because on the
Mm.
TrackMan simulation, you don't have the hospitality units
Yeah.
there that kind of define the holes, right? So it's like you said, there's not a lot of shade, there's not a lot of trees, it's pretty open, but it feels like a big park. But I think the thing that is really interesting is there's a lot of people that are getting into golf, and they're not getting in the traditional sense, meaning that they're not going to green grass. They're actually
Mm.
coming into an environment like mine, to where they're starting with simulation.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
thing that's
Yeah.
interesting about simulated golf is that the courses that do really well are the courses that obviously have the most, elevation change and topography and scenic things
Mm.
like that, right? So, like, for an example, like Lahinge does great on TrackMan, because you can really see it and you almost can kind of feel it, and it's a really cool experience on TrackMan.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But do you think, being a golf course architect, that knowing that there's a lot of people who are falling in love with golf that way, could you see in reality to where the architecture gets a little more animated, let's say, and a little more over the top, to where it actually presents itself better to a simulated model and has a little more defining characteristics?
Ah, interesting question. I mean, we are, you know, Marco Simone is an undulating site for sure, and I mean that posed a lot of questions, and a lot of different questions for the professionals, and I think if you compare, I think on the European tour there are probably more undulating courses, and
I
maybe
agree.
we'll get into that later, and that's maybe one of the reasons why Europe were a little bit more successful. But part of our job is when we don't want to be just moving land for the sake of moving land. We have a responsibility to treat all sites, as sympathetically as possible, and trying to find, the best holes that a particular site gives you. So it's you, yeah. I mean, the, they do add a lot of interest from a simulator point of view, but like to say to a client, well, we're going to move another million cube of material for that particular reason, that could be an interesting sell to a potential
Yeah,
owner.
I just think as we move into this, I think Dan had kind of alluded to it a little bit. Especially in America, golf course architecture is more hot topic, because you're
Mm,
seeing more golf courses designed to attract and be a standalone kind of destination, right? So,
sure.
if you think of a abandoned dunes, for example, that's obviously a magnet, right? And it's
Sure.
just it's a little bit. I like your answer a lot. Like, as someone who like believes in sustainability, and is a little more traditional that way, you know, I definitely see the value in trying to be sympathetic in your approach with the land that's provided. However, there's also the opposite of that, and I don't want to get into a compare and contrast, but I happened to be at
Mm.
the Ryder Cup at Whistling Straits, and that land was a flat piece of land, and now it is anything but. And it's
Yeah.
like I just wonder how much temptation there is from these development groups to create that kind of attraction so that they can spin it off and sell it and repackage it in a simulation and things like that.
I
Marketability.
For sure. I think, but yeah, every client is different. So I think, you know, that will be attractive to some clients, and it won't be attractive to others for sure. But I definitely see your point, and you know, any way that we can bring more people into the game is definitely a positive. So you know, we need to be looking at every avenue that we can for sure.
Dave, what were your main takeaways from watching the golf? I mean, in terms of how the players approached the challenge of Marco Simone, was there anything that surprised you? Was there anything that really thought, oh wow, I really didn't expect that? And I know that the one of the things that we spoke about before the Ryder Cup was the short par four on the front line, that
Mm.
you were maybe hoping that wouldn't be pushed up. But obviously, you know, we can come on to some of the data on that, which I'm very keen to get your opinion on. But was there anything that stood out for you or that surprised you about the way either side tackled the test of Marco Simone?
Um, I mean, I think similar to Paris, I just don't think the Americans drove the ball as well as Europe. And the number of times they were pulling driver when, you know, the obvious play, it seemed, was a 3-wood into the wider part of the fairway. You know, and you play from there. But I mean, the penalty for missing the rough was so obvious. And it just felt that you know, the Americans and sometimes the Europeans as well got caught in that trap. And I, you know, so that was, you know, I've come back and I've only managed to get to Saturday four balls, but I'm trying to catch up and watch it all again on TV. But yeah, I really felt that yeah, they just kept being tempted, as was the hope and the wish from the European captain
We've
that they would pull the driver, and they kept pulling it. Yeah.
Dan and myself have talked about stylistically the differences between American and European golf quite a bit actually. And you know, I've been fortunate enough to play both. I quite prefer European golf. I think it's much more artistic and fun, and I definitely think that the creativity has to be higher. But I think for Americans, especially, you know, young competitive Americans, the idea is that you have to shoot 63 every time you play golf, and that's the way that it's kind of looked at in
Mm.
the U.S. And I think that that breeds this just attacking mentality to where you can't help yourself but hit the driver because you always hit the driver. So we hit the driver here because we're trying to
Y-
make a birdie. And
Yeah.
like we
Yeah.
just can't get out of that kind of almost archaic way of thinking. But I think that my man Double D has some pretty good data here. And I know we've referenced it a few times. And I would absolutely love it if my man would talk about some of this data because I know the word data gets thrown out there a lot, but I would like to really come on to some of the statistical things that we actually have seen when breaking this down. So, Dan, if you wouldn't mind, you know, maybe kind of start teasing some of this out, and maybe we can get Dave to react to some of it and see if maybe that gets a reaction, and he maybe tips his cap that was part of the design.
Well, I think thanks, Dooch. I mean, I think you mentioned one thing there, Dave, which was very significant, tempting Team America to take the driver. The Team Europe were considerably better driving the ball in every single session of the Ryder Cup.
Yeah.
You know, and we're talking sort of more than 20 strokes gained better across the Ryder Cup. I mean, that's sort of huge. I know there were a lot of matches, but that is an enormous amount. We've put all the data from the Ryder Cup through Clipped, and we've looked at the shot quality, the average shot quality in every sort of distance, being every skill, and also in the sort of, you know, both overall and then off the tee approach around the green putting, and then dived in deeper than that. So you're absolutely right in the sense that, you know, the Team USA were tempted to take the driver and they paid the price because there was grass. Could just tell us a little bit about the rough at Marco Simone, because it was a different type of grass, wasn't it? And probably a grass.
Wide
Maybe I'm
blade.
wrong
They
here.
only said it 763 times. Like it was.
Yeah.
Yes,
I don't
please
know.
tell us about the grass.
They kept calling it paspalum. It wasn't paspalum. It's a tall fescue mix. I mean, it's so,
Right. Okay. Well, that's that nailed.
Yeah, it's paspalum fairways, and it's just a tall fescue mix, which is incredibly strong and, as you say, a very thick blade. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think we also mentioned elevation, which I think is really interesting. US courses on the PGA Tour particularly are considerably less hilly than Marco Simone, particularly the back nine. I mean, actually, the back nine had, let me count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 holes that have a greater elevation change than 80% of courses on the PGA Tour.
Wow.
So there were, and particularly for approach shots. So, we were able in the build up to the Ryder Cup, take all the clip data for all 24 players. And Europe had a clear advantage, both playing uphill and downhill. And I think that also is very interesting in terms of feeding into your pairings, because the pairings, I think, in some ways, the European pairings might have been a surprise to some people, whereas I don't think there were any surprises in the American approach, which was, Justin Thomas is going to play with Jordan Spieth. Patrick Cantlay is going to play with Xander Schauffele. Scotty Scheffler is probably going to play with Sam Burns. It was sort of written before the event, whereas it feels like there was a lot more attention to analytics and much more attention to actually the strength, the skill set required on certain holes, which obviously comes into its own in foursomes.
I mean,
so
I suppose it's quite difficult. I mean, if you're Zach Johnson, you've got two of those pairings in Cantlay, Schauffele, and Jordan Spieth and Justin Thomas. They've proven over numerous Presidents' Cups and Ryder Cups to be successful. So it would have been a pretty ballsy call for him to say, "Oh well, I'm actually going to split them up." But your point about the data and the stats on this relative to Marco Simone is a good one. But I think it would have been ballsy for Zach Johnson to have split.
It would have been.
I think it would have been more ballsy to tell Jordan Spieth to put driver away and hit 3-wood over the water. I think that was probably the ballsy call.
Yeah, I think, but that wasn't picked up in the press conference after, because that was all Capgate on 18, which became the main story. But if there wasn't, Joe LaCava walking around waving his cap, then I think Zach Johnson would have had a whole load of different questions to answer that Saturday evening.
I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be real honest real quick. Hang on, because this is an interesting topic, but it just goes in. It's like, I think if you look at the data and we have so much of it, it would make even the math in the world blush. But really, when you look at it, it's just there's case point after case point for the fact that the Europeans were very, very well prepared. They understood what the task was. They probably went out there with the smartest NASA type people in the world to figure out the elevation changes with the degrees of temperature, with the relative humidity. Like they had it figured out, right? They did their homework. And I just felt like a lot of the storylines, to your point, that were picked up and taken out of Marco Simone were newspaper trash. Like I just felt like they were all tabloids, and it felt like they were running a lot of interference and a lot of cover for the fact that our captain just showed up with a team that was unprepared. And just like the military, generally when you start pointing the finger, you start at the top, and obviously we have to start with the captain. And I just think that no matter how you look at it, they were completely unprepared, and they got shown what a prepared team could do when they were motivated.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. A few of the lessons from the Golf National, they obviously didn't seem that those were learned. Like only one player played in Paris before that event. That was Justin Thomas. Not one player played an Italian Open. There's been 3 so far. And I said to Dan on the previous pod, I think, if playing a course in tournament conditions, even though it was stroke play, that's going to help for sure. You're gonna know the course better. You're gonna know where the better miss is and the
Yeah.
wrong miss is. So and obviously not no competitive golf for 5 weeks is it's going
But
to be
there's
tough
also
coming into a Ryder
nuance
Cup.
to a golf course that I
Yeah,
don't know. I like to think that some people, design for these things. But my favorite thing to try to explain to some people is when you look at number 12 at Augusta National, one of the most famous holes of golf in the world. I don't know if it was intentional. I don't know that it was. But the thing that makes that hole so iconic is the vortex of wind that's created behind that green. It
yeah,
literally creates a cyclone like this on that green because you've got 11 coming in this way, you've got 15 coming in from the other way, and then you've got a massive backdrop behind that hole with the land shooting straight upward, and it just creates this cyclone. And
yeah,
that's why Tiger and a lot of guys have figured out that if you catch it the correct way, spinning this way, if you aim left, it pulls the ball in towards the green versus hitting the right side of that cyclone where it spits it out right, which is where the
mm,
Rays Creek is.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's understanding those nuances, right? And I don't know how. I'm sure that things like that are considered in the design process, but you have to learn those for yourself through the playing.
For sure. So I come back to the Zach Johnson and Spieth thing on the tee on 16. They were actually quite right in that, to actually get into that pin, you had to come in it from a different angle. So where Justin Thomas had left his drive, he had a pretty really difficult up and down because of where that particular pin is. So that we are and that any pin on the right, the far right hand side of 16, you're actually better off coming in with a pitching wedge from the fairway to get out there because there's a like a knob that sort of protects all those pins on the right. So their thinking was actually pretty sound. I think he just pushed the tee shot. But yeah, and then going back to four ball Saturday, the only people who actually played 11 well were the American team, where they actually hit 3-wood or 5-wood off the tee. And to that particular pin, the play was to actually throw a wedge from 90 yards past the pin and spin it back. Whereas a lot of the Europeans got caught up, but they were behind on their matches. They were 3 or 4 behind, so they felt like they had to chase it. But the actual play to that particular pin was where the Americans played it. So I think, you know, they got better and better as like they couldn't get too much worse after the first couple of foursomes sessions, but the more they got to know the golf course, I think the better they played. And I think and they were obviously getting more into tournament play, tournament fit, so to speak.
That's a really good point, Dave, because actually that's borne out in the clip data. You can see that the margin between the two sides in foursomes and four balls just starts to diminish as the week goes on, and like you say, they learn the course.
Yeah.
I mean, just the par threes were extraordinary. I mean, hole 7 on Friday, Europe won it 7 times, 5 times. Sorry, won it 5 times on Friday.
Wow.
I mean,
Out of 8 games. Wow.
Out of eight games, they won it 5 times, and they were 33% better on par 3 tee shots on the foursomes in day one. Again, whether that's a mixture of tournament readiness, tournament preparation, tournament hardness, and course knowledge, but those two things, and to your point, they obviously did learn the course and they started to play themselves into form. But by that stage, they're completely behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Yeah.
like watching a professional band, right? Like, I mean, the comment that I'm glad you said that, Double D, but it's kind of like watching a band that doesn't really want to be there. And like the first 3 songs, like they're kind of like warm up songs, and they're, you can see they're maybe drinking that red cup a little frequentlier than they do at the later end of the show. But like they eventually get it going and they put on a great show. But the first few, and I felt the same way about the American team. And I think that the data definitely supports the fact that once again, had they had been prepared, we would have saw probably much more what we saw on Sunday
Yeah.
versus what we saw earlier in the week.
But I think it was also a master stroke from them to switch, the foursomes and the four balls on the Friday. They've obviously factored in the fact that there's no, there may be some rustiness from the Americans, and then playing them on Friday morning and Saturday morning, first 2 of the 3 sessions at Europe's strongest, sort of match play
Well, as an
format.
American, we don't know that there's another format other than stroke play, Dave. Like, like honestly, like I pride myself on somewhat understanding things, and when it's like foursomes and 4 ball, like I have to think a little bit. Like, okay, which one are we playing? Because we
Yeah,
just
yeah.
don't play it in the U.S. And honestly, I think if you looked at, and this is a little different for another conversation, but if you looked at this massive influx of new golfers that we have coming into the industry, into the game. When you look at that, I would argue that most of them probably don't even realize that there's a format other than stroke play. I mean,
Mm,
it's really kind of alarming at how ill prepared we are for that format.
yeah. Yeah.
We looked at in the build up to the Ryder Cup at Clipped. We looked at the most commonly hit approach shots at Marco Simone in the last 2, I think, or 3 Italian Opens, and they've been played between 180 and 220 yards, both from the fairway and the tee. And Europe had 8 of the top 10 performers from both sides at that distance. Again, it's sort of like, tempting the Americans to pull the driver, whereas actually, even by laying back and having a longer second shot, which was something we discussed in the build-up, Dave, that really played into Europe's strengths.
Yeah, I mean, the captain didn't do, too much to the golf course, but there were definitely some areas where, well, there were definitely some fairways that were narrowed up to try and maximize that perceived strength in Europe's game. And obviously, the data proves that they are stronger at those distances.
Yeah, they really are. I mean, I think that you look right the way across the data. I mean, in approach, Europe 140 to 160 yards were better in 4 out of 5 sessions. 160 to 180 yards better in 3 out of 5. 200 to 220, 4 out of 5. 220 to 240, 4 out of 5. So that's that's a big edge right the way across the bulk of approach shots that were hit at Marco Simone. And it sort of all fits into my theory, which was Marco Simone was Europe's 13th man. I mean, obviously he had the Seve locker in the team changing room, but maybe it was after Seve, it was Europe's 14th man then.
Well, I mean, look, I think a lot of, a lot of credit's got to go to the captain and the vice captains for, coming up with a strategy. And the strategy did work in Paris, and it wasn't too much of a surprise that that strategy was going to be implemented at Marco Simone, but it definitely worked. And the as you say, the numbers prove it, and I've seen some of your chart numbers here, and some of the numbers are literally off the
Staggering.
charts. The difference is just
So if we were on the backside all the way, we had one project left. So let's say that we're 40 years from now, and you are designing your Ryder Cup finale. This is the big one. This is the one that you're going to be remembered for, and we're 40 years from now. So we've played quite a few Ryder Cups between here and there. Tell me about what you could foresee this golf course looking like. I'm curious. Where does the golf course architecture kind of thinking see the game going in the future?
well. That's a very interesting question.
And remember,
I mean,
it's for the Ryder Cup. So we're not
it's for the Ryder Cup. I think. Well, I mean, you can't foresee what will happen so many years down the line. I think what we have created at Marco Simone, the spectator and the player experience. You would look to do similar things, because obviously it's proved to be a big hit. I think like the elevation change gave us opportunities to have raised greens and big runoffs and undulations in the green. And I think that's quite important because it engages the spectator so much more, because they are watching these balls, and like let's say 10, for instance, with a big false front, if the ball doesn't get there, they're cheering as the ball goes down. I think that's all part of Ryder Cup and an atmosphere and getting people involved. And I think Ryder Cups, match play golf, having half par holes is important. And I think that's birdie, easy for half par holes. So I think that's incredibly important for match play golf. So right now, as we know, there will be lots of change, but right now you'd look to do try and do something similar and keep the player and the fan engaged. And I think that's an important thing with Ryder Cups.
I think you said something really interesting there. I mean, about the half par holes, and there were plenty at Marco Simone, and that's what made it such a great match play course. It brought the whole notion of risk and reward right up front in the players' minds, and also in the minds of the spectator and the viewer at home. That's what made it so enjoyable and so gripping. But the other thing I think is really key is that even though the course measured 7,250 yards, not hugely long by modern standards, yet it put a lot of different clubs in the players' hands, which I think is really interesting. So that I think this almost follows on from the Duch's question about, where is golf going? Are we going to have, when we say stadium courses, courses with literally huge permanent stadiums sort of built into them, but also in terms of, obviously the distance debate we could talk about all day and all night, but what Marco Simone showed for my money was that even at 7,250 yards, which is a long way in if I was playing it, but for these guys, not a long way, they were asked to hit a lot of different shots with a lot of different clubs.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, when the Zach Johnson went out there over a year ago, he made that statement that Marco Simone is going to test every club in their bag, which as an architect you are looking to do. You're looking to pose all those different questions. Yes, the elevation poses questions. There was obviously uphill, downhill, side hill shots, left to right to left, and I think as an architect you are looking to try and ask the player, and especially the professional player, this course is Marco Simone is always going to be known for hosting a Ryder Cup. So and we were all obviously trying to do that. And as you say, one of the things I take away from this week is there were players that probably hadn't hit a 5-iron or put a 5-iron in their bag for a year, and they were actually having to play with these clubs again. So I think that's great. And all we can try and do is pose as many questions as we can, and that provides an excitement level for the spectator and the viewer watching on TV.
Well, without trying to get into too much flattery, I really think that that shows when we talk about like the distance debate, I get really frustrated with, because it's totally theoretical, because it totally depends on where we're playing, right? Like there's a real distance problem in Denver, Colorado. Like, yeah, we hit it too far there. But like when we go down to Florida and the swamps and at sea level, all of a sudden 7,200 yards feels like 78. So it's like, I really feel like what happens in this distance debate is that, for lack of better terminology, a lot of the designers go out there and they just kind of like, it's a flat golf course. And okay, well, we can't figure out a way to make shots play differently. So, okay, we'll just make it 8,000 yards. And that's not really helping anybody. I don't think that the general public out there playing golf enjoys it. I don't think the members of that club enjoy it. And I know that the tour guys don't enjoy playing an 8,000-yard golf course, because it's not creative, and it just feels like you're actually working at it instead of playing it. So I applaud you, because I think that there are ways to be creative and strategic with how you force players to play different shots off of tees.
Yeah, no, well, thank you. I mean, yeah, it's as I said, it was just great to see these guys hitting different clubs, but with Marco Simone, we've also tried to factor in the fact that it's still a members club, You know, and yes, it is a difficult course, but I think people will go to Marco Simone and go, well, I'm playing a Ryder Cup course, so I'm expecting it to be, you know, a level of difficulty or a higher level of difficulty. But you know, we always do try
Hard
and
on the simulator. I mean, not very many golf courses are hard on a TrackMan simulator, but I'll be damned if Marco Simone isn't a difficult track on the old TrackMan simulator, man. Like it's even
but
from
but
I mean, I think the white or quote unquote the member tee, right, is what 6,800 yards, I think is what I played it from earlier. Is that about right?
yeah, that's sort of the medal tee, 68, but the sort of the normal yellow members tee was sort of 63, 62, 63.
Okay,
So yeah.
gotcha. Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's just it feels like a lot longer like that shot on one, I think that and I don't know, once again, I'm playing it on a simulator, right? But I know that that green in reality is a little bit higher, I think, than the tee box, right? It's a little bit
Yeah.
elevated,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it plays way more elevated because the tee shot is actually downhill, right? And then it kind of goes back up the hill.
The landing area and the tee are similar-ish, but there's a stream in front of the tees which make you feel like you're going down and up a little bit.
But that second
Um,
shot plays a lot longer than you would think it would
yeah,
normally play. I mean,
yeah,
it's just things like that that you constantly see throughout that round.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean that's you know, I mean, and I said this to Dan. I mean, the elevation change we actually saw as a massive positive on this side, especially when you're trying to factor in spectators and the fans and what you can give them,
Well,
and the difference between Paris and Marco Simone is Paris had like embankments on both sides of only one golf hole. So, spectator you got to see a lot of spectators around one hole, but they only got to see that particular hole. Whereas Marco Simone, you had so much, you could see numerous golf holes, and I think that added to, the experience a lot.
Dave, can I ask you, the Ryder Cup is a huge process. You've been working on this project for many years. But European Golf Design, the company you work for, has a long history with the Ryder Cup and obviously with the European Tour. Can I ask you sort of, what's next? Obviously, everything keeps moving forwards and, planning and the processes for the next home European Cup for Team Europe are well underway. But
Yep.
what's next for you in terms of both the Ryder Cup, but also sort of other projects that you might be really excited about or really passionate about at the moment?
Well, the next Ryder Cup is, Adair Manor in Ireland. That's already been well, newly. I think there was a golf course there before, and it's been redone by Fazio and Tom Marsell from Fazio Design. So there will be, work on that, but that will be a relationship between them and Ryder Cup Europe. European Golf Design won't be involved in that project, but there are numerous candidates for 31 and 35 that the company is involved in, but obviously nothing to really be said on that at this stage. So yeah, I mean there are possibly a couple of those projects knocking around. But yeah, I mean I've got some really interesting projects. One 27-hole project in Jakarta, which really interesting part of the world to go to. Been there a couple of times. In terms of other new projects, there's one in Spain, there's another one in Croatia. So there's a lot on the drawing board. We're going back to Kram-Susier up in the Swiss Alps, and not next week. We're starting construction there again, doing a bit more work. So there's a lot
the
going
elevation
on.
in the Swiss Alps, I'm curious.
That
What's
one's
the elevation?
1,500 meters at that golf course.
I've
Golf
played
is
that
a
golf
long
course.
way.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've played Crom Montana. It's quite a spectacular venue, and you talked about playing golf in Denver. The ball does fly a certain distance further up in the Swiss Alps. I mean,
yeah.
just one more question, Dave, if I don't mind asking. I mean, you're rewinding all the way to the beginning. You're now at a point probably in your career. I might be wrong here, but where all the accolades are going to come your way. You've had this incredible success with Marco Simone, and very well deserved. Your start in golf course architecture was very similar to Alistair Mackenzie's, was it not? In the sense that you submitted a whole design to a competition, and then that really gave you your start in the business, did it not?
Yeah, that's right. No, it was back in 2002. I was in South Africa finishing my building architecture thesis, and my grandfather was seriously ill. He lived in Cardiff, so I came over and said my goodbyes. And then on the way back, there was a designer hole competition in Golf World magazine, which they were running in conjunction with European Golf Design. And I put some entries in the post box at Heathrow, and yeah, was just the lucky winner, I suppose. But then, so that was end of 2002, and then yeah, got a job at EGD in November 2004. So been there 19 years. But yeah, it was yeah, definitely the foot in the door. Um, yeah,
I
I
can't
suppose it's very
imagine
lucky. Yeah.
I can't imagine the amount of skills that it would require to be a golf course architect. I mean, I was kind of really I was nervous. This is the first podcast I've really been nervous about because Double D has to do it pretty often, but we get a swing guy on here and he feels a little out of his element. But I really feel out of my element, and I've played a lot of golf courses and even some really famous ones that are really well rated. But if you really drilled me down and said, "Hey, what do you like about that golf course?" It generally is tied pretty closely to what I shoot. You know what I mean? It's not because of
Yeah.
the actual golf course. It's more how my experience was there. So I would imagine like it's difficult to design a golf course that you feel has a backbone and has some ethics, you know what I mean, and doesn't just roll over. But at the same time, isn't one of those golf courses that you create to where everybody hates it because it's just a kick in the teeth and nobody wants
Mm.
to go and play it because there's a ton of those out there too. And I think that if you look at those golf courses economically, they tend to really struggle because it's just not an enjoyable experience.
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, so we are very fortunate that we get to work on a lot of projects. I mean, obviously, tournament projects, and that's obviously through our association with the European Tour. But on every project, we're trying to factor in, the main client is somebody that's got a high handicap, and you've got to try and make them as fun for them as possible because they are your return customer, and you got to make them enjoyable for them. But you're obviously trying to provide enough challenge and strategic interest in a golf course so that they yeah, you know
Which course have you played, Dave, that sort of you just keep coming back to thinking, wow, that's got so much strategic interest to it. That's got so many interesting design elements and it's playable. Which one for you? And it doesn't, obviously there's some legendary courses out there, but is there one for you that sort of captures so many of the elements that you value in golf course architecture that, if you just had to play one place again and again and again through that architect's lens, which one would it be?
Well, I'm going to be a bit boring here, unfortunately, but it's. I think it comes back to Michael's point of every time I've played it particularly well. But that's the old course at St Andrews.
Yes.
Just yeah, I just you know you can play it a million different ways. Um, you know, depending on the wind, depending, you just there's so much interest in that place. And I think the first time you actually go there, you're just a little underwhelmed by the place. But then the more times you walk around there, the more you see every time you go
I can
there. I
attest
think.
to that. I can attest to that exact thing. I was there for the 150th, and if it hadn't, like, I remember walking. I think I got in Monday that week, and I remember going out and working with a player that morning, and then I remember walking back like into town to get dinner before I left to go to my Airbnb. And I just remember thinking, like, man, if it wasn't for the tournament, I don't think that place is all that. Like, I don't get it. Like,
Yeah,
am I missing? Like, I've spent my whole life trying to get here, and I don't. But by the end of the week, I just really, really, really fell in love with the place. And it's to
yeah,
your point. There's something there. There's that interest. The wind is different. The whole place completely different. And it's
yeah.
not just the full shots either. The short game is incredibly different day to day.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, it comes back to some of the things we try to do at Marco Simone. It's like depending on certain pin positions, you play the golf hole differently. Strategically, you plot your way differently to certain pins, and I think St Andrews you do that a lot. So
I think that's the
you
thing,
know,
isn't it, about a great course, that it reveals itself, doesn't it? With each playing. I mean, I think so many people have had the same experience at the old course. First time, it's like, oh, really? What's all this about? But then every time you have the good fortune to play it, it just reveals more of its intricacy, more of its genius, more of the nuances, until you're completely intoxicated by it. And you only have to look at the impact it's had, and the influence, how it's influenced, generations of great golf course architects,
yeah,
and the esteem it's held in by the very greatest players in the history of the game.
yeah.
To see why I think that's just the perfect answer from a golf course architect.
Hey, Dave, by the
Maybe the
way,
safe and boring one, but it was definitely.
I
But
wanted to
yeah,
let you
I
know,
mean,
Dave, Dan got his job on this podcast by revealing himself. So just be careful when he starts throwing that word around.
I'm not. I'm not going to tell you what I'm wearing on the bottom half. Yeah, no, it's a great post. Well, Dave, listen, thank you so much for your time. I'm really thrilled for you, as you know, and I've been sort of forwarding you all the incredible plaudits and accolades that people have been writing on social media, and I'm just thrilled for you that it turned out so well, and it was such a great course. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining us today.
No. Thank you for those kind words, and thanks for having me on. Been
Yeah,
been
Dave,
great to chat.
it's been a great pleasure, and from somebody who definitely doesn't belong in this conversation, I really appreciated it, because I think it's been really interesting to learn and think about some of this. I mean, the scale of a Ryder Cup is obviously massive and huge, obviously an enormous undertaking by you and your team and everybody involved. But even as the losing side, I still have to tip my hat, because it was an incredible venue, and I think that it definitely displayed the best that everybody had to offer. So my hat's off. I thank Dave for joining us on this episode of Making the Turn. As always, Double D came in with a lot of facts and a lot of good notes. So I always appreciate having a good partner that bails me out, even when I'm not the expert of the topic. So thanks to Double D. Thanks to Dave once again. And if you haven't already, make sure to download this podcast. And if you haven't found it already, you also can find the full video on YouTube by searching Making the Turn Golf Podcast. So that does it for us. And thanks so much for tuning in. And until next time, keep grinding.